Ladies and gentlemen, let me talk to you for a moment about something powerful, something simple, and something life-changing: how men react when you match their distance. When you match a man's distance, what you are really doing is allowing his true intentions to rise to the surface without confrontation, without arguments, and without emotional exhaustion. Too often, women are made to feel that clarity comes from conversations, explanations, and repeated chances. But intention doesn't live in words. It lives in behavior. When a man starts pulling back and you rush forward to close the gap, you blur the truth. You give him comfort without commitment and presence without effort. Matching his distance removes that safety net and lets intention stand on its own. A man who genuinely values you is not confused by space. Distance doesn't erase interest, it activates it. When you stop initiating, stop checking in, and stop compensating for his lack of effort, a man with real intentions feels the shift immediately. Not because he is losing control, but because he is losing connection. His response is not panic, it is purpose. He steps forward naturally, not with excuses, but with action. He communicates more clearly, he becomes more consistent, and he reclaims the space he allowed to grow between you. That response tells you everything you need to know without you asking a single question. On the other hand, a man whose intentions were shallow reacts very differently. When you match his distance, he doesn't step up, he fades out. He becomes passive, distracted, or indifferent. And that reaction is not sudden. It was always there. The difference is you stop covering it up. Matching distance doesn't change a man. It removes the effort you were supplying on his behalf. When nothing replaces it, the truth is revealed. That truth may be uncomfortable, but it is honest, and honesty saves you time, energy, and emotional investment. This is why matching distance is not manipulation. Manipulation seeks control over another person's behavior. Matching distance seeks control over your own energy. You are no longer chasing reassurance or forcing alignment. You are simply responding instead of pursuing. And in that stillness, intention becomes visible. Men who are serious don't need to be chased. They need space to show up. Men who are not serious disappear when the chase ends. Matching distance also restores balance. Relationships are not built on one person doing the emotional labor while the other coasts. When effort is mutual, distance doesn't feel threatening, it feels temporary. But when effort is one-sided, distance feels like abandonment. Matching it brings balance back and forces reality to speak louder than hope. And once you see that reality clearly, you stop doubting yourself, stop overthinking, and stop questioning what you deserve. Consistency matters more than words, because words are easy. But consistency requires intention, discipline, and emotional investment. Anyone can say the right thing when it benefits them. Anyone can promise effort, affection, or a future in a moment of comfort or fear. But consistency is what happens when no one is watching, when there is no pressure, and when showing up is no longer convenient. That is why consistency is the clearest measure of how a man truly feels. When a man's words sound beautiful, but his actions arrive late, irregular, or only when it suits him. What you are witnessing is not confusion, it is inconsistency. And inconsistency is not accidental. It reflects priority. A man will always be consistent with what he values, whether that is his work, his hobbies, his friendships, or his personal goals. If he can show up regularly for everything else, but becomes unpredictable with you, that unpredictability is the message. Matching distance forces consistency to reveal itself. When you stop reminding him, stop initiating every interaction, and stop making space for half effort, his pattern becomes undeniable. A consistent man does not need constant access to feel secure. He maintains connection naturally. He checks in because he wants to, not because he fears losing you. His energy remains steady whether things are calm or challenging. That steadiness creates trust, safety, and emotional peace. An inconsistent man, however, relies heavily on words. He explains instead of improves. He apologizes without changing. He reassures without reinforcing. When you match his distance, his words lose power because they are no longer supported by your availability. If his interest is real, consistency appears quickly. If it is not, silence replaces promises. And silence, unlike excuses, cannot be negotiated. Consistency also protects you emotionally. When you rely on words, you are constantly interpreting, hoping, and guessing. When you rely on consistency, there is no confusion. You don't have to decode tone, timing, or intention. The effort is visible. You know where you stand because his behavior doesn't fluctuate based on mood or convenience. That clarity allows you to relax instead of brace yourself for disappointment. Many women stay longer than they should because they fall in love with potential spoken aloud instead of patterns lived daily. Matching distance interrupts that cycle. It shifts your focus away from what is said and back to what is done. And once you make that shift, your standards rise naturally. You no longer argue for effort or explain your needs repeatedly. You observe consistency and decide accordingly. A man who is serious understands that love is maintained, not announced. He knows that showing up once is impressive, but showing up repeatedly is meaningful. When you match distance, you give him the opportunity to demonstrate that understanding. And whatever he chooses to do in that space tells you everything you need to know. When you mirror a man's energy, you are not withdrawing love, interest, or maturity. You are restoring balance. Energy is the purest currency in any connection because it is given before words are formed. It shows up in how often someone reaches out, how present they are when they do, how much thought they put into maintaining connection, and how consistently they make you feel considered. When your energy is high and is low, the imbalance creates confusion. When your energy matches his, the truth becomes visible. Many men become comfortable when they realize someone will always give more than they do. Not because they are cruel, but because human nature adapts to what it is allowed. If you are always initiating, always adjusting, always understanding, you unintentionally mask his effort level. He never has to rise because you are already carrying the emotional weight. Mirroring his energy removes that cushion. Suddenly, this leveled effort is no longer compared to your hope, but to reality. When a man is genuinely invested, mirrored energy does not push him away. Instead, it motivates him. He notices the shift immediately. He feels the absence of the extra effort you were providing and responds by increasing his own. He texts with more intention. He becomes more attentive. He fills the space not out of fear, but because connection matters to him. His energy rises naturally to meet yours because mutual effort feels right to him. But when a man's interest is shallow, mirrored energy creates silence. Not because he is confused, but because he was never carrying enough energy to begin with. When you stop overextending, there is nothing left to sustain the connection. And that silence is not a loss, it is information. It shows you that the relationship was moving on borrowed effort, not shared intention. Mirroring energy also shifts your power inward. Instead of monitoring his behavior or wondering why things feel off, you become grounded in your own response. You stop reacting emotionally and start responding intentionally. That shift brings clarity and self-respect. You no longer feel anxious about doing too much or too little because you are simply doing what is being done to you. Balance removes anxiety. This approach also prevents resentment. Overgiving often turns into quiet frustration when effort is not returned. By mirroring energy early, you protect yourself from that emotional buildup. You are no longer silently hoping he will notice how much you do. You let his actions speak for him. Effort either meets effort or it doesn't. Energy mirroring is not about testing a man. It is about aligning with truth. When two people are equally invested, mirrored energy creates harmony. When only one person is invested, mirrored energy exposes the gap. And once that gap is visible, you are no longer guessing, waiting, or explaining. You are simply seeing what is, and that awareness is where real confidence begins. When self-respect enters a relationship, the entire dynamic shifts, even if nothing is said out loud. Self-respect is not loud, demanding, or aggressive. It is quiet, steady, and deeply felt. It shows up in what you tolerate, what you stop explaining, and what you choose not to chase. When you match a man's distance from a place of self-respect, you are no longer operating from fear of loss, but from confidence in your worth. That internal shift changes how you are treated more than any conversation ever could. Without self-respect, distance feels like rejection. It triggers anxiety, overthinking, and the urge to fix things immediately. You reach out more, explain yourself more, and lower your expectations just to keep the connection alive. In doing so, you unintentionally teach a man that your boundaries are flexible and your needs are negotiable. The relationship begins to revolve around his comfort rather than mutual effort. But when self-respect is present, distance is no longer something you chase away. It becomes something you observe. Matching distance from a place of self-respect sends a powerful, unspoken message. I value connection, but I value myself more. You are no longer trying to prove your worth or secure his attention. You are allowing him to show whether he is capable of meeting you where you stand. That alone changes the balance of power. A man who respects himself, and you will recognize that shift and respond with clarity and effort. He understands that access to you is earned, not guaranteed. For men who are used to women overextending, self-respect can feel unfamiliar. Some may initially test it, pulling back further to see if you will chase. But when you remain calm and consistent with your boundaries, the dynamic changes. He either steps up with intention or he fades away. Both outcomes are shaped by your self-respect, not your persuasion. Self-respect also removes emotional chaos. You stop internalizing his distance as a reflection of your value. You stop asking what you did wrong or how you can be better. Instead, you understand that his effort reflects his readiness, not your worth. That understanding creates emotional stability. You are no longer riding highs and lows based on his behavior. You remain grounded regardless of the outcome. When self-respect leads your actions, relationships become simpler. You don't threaten, beg, or issue ultimatums. You don't need to announce your boundaries because your behavior enforces them. You match energy, you match effort, you match distance. And in doing so, you allow the relationship to reveal its natural direction without force. This is why self-respect is so powerful. It doesn't try to change a man. It changes the environment in which he must choose how to show up. And once that environment is set, you no longer feel powerless. You feel aligned, steady, and confident, regardless of whether he stays or goes. Silence and space are often misunderstood because they don't come with explanations, justifications, or emotional reassurance. Yet they communicate more clearly than long conversations ever could. When you stop filling every gap with words, messages, and emotional labor, you allow reality to speak. Silence is not emptiness, it is information. Space is not absence, it is exposure. Together they reveal what effort, interest, and intention truly exist without being prompted. When a man creates distance and you immediately rush to close it, you interrupt the message that distance was meant to send. You replace clarity with noise. You explain your feelings, ask questions, and try to restore closeness through words. But words can be negotiated, delayed, or softened. Silence cannot. When you respond to distance with silence and space, you are not punishing him, you are listening. You are allowing his next move to show you what he actually wants. A man who values connection feels silence. Not as rejection, but as awareness. He notices the lack of access. He senses the shift in energy. Silence creates room for reflection, and in that space, intention surfaces. If he cares, he reaches out with purpose. Not casually, not vaguely, but with effort that restores connection. Silence gives him the opportunity to act without being guided, reminded, or emotionally supported through it. For a man wholly engaging out of convenience, silence feels easy. There is no urgency, no desire to fill the space, no discomfort with the absence. And that response, or lack of one, speaks louder than any excuse ever could. Silence doesn't ask for honesty, it demands it. You don't have to confront, accuse, or explain. You simply observe what happens when you stop doing the emotional work for two people. Space also restores your internal clarity. When you step back, you stop reacting emotionally and start seeing patterns. You notice how often you were initiating. You recognize how much effort you were supplying. Space removes emotional fog and replaces it with perspective. It gives you time to reconnect with yourself instead of being consumed by someone else's behavior. Silence teaches restraint. It prevents you from saying things you don't mean, just to keep a connection alive. It protects your dignity. You no longer plead for understanding or reassurance. You allow your absence to communicate that you are not available for half effort or confusion. That restraint is powerful because it is rooted in self. Control, not fear. In a world where constant communication is expected, choosing silence and space is disruptive. It shifts the dynamic. It removes emotional dependency and replaces it with mutual choice. A man either chooses to step into that space with intention, or he allows it to remain empty. Either way, you gain clarity without sacrificing your peace. Silence and space do not end connections that are meant to grow. They only end connections that were surviving on noise instead of substance. And when you understand that, you stop being afraid of quiet. You begin to trust it. Boundaries are often mistaken for walls, but in reality, they are invitations to clarity. When you establish boundaries by matching distance, you are not shutting a man out. You are showing him how to engage with you in a healthy, honest way. Boundaries do not create confusion, they remove it. They define what is acceptable without needing constant explanation. And they allow a man to decide whether he is willing and able to meet you at that level. When boundaries are absent, relationships drift. Effort becomes inconsistent, communication becomes unclear, and expectations are silently violated. You may feel uneasy, but struggle to explain why. That discomfort comes from blurred lines. When you suddenly start matching distance, responding instead of pursuing, and protecting your time and energy, those blurred lines sharpen. The relationship either adjusts into balance or reveals its instability. A man who respects you does not feel threatened by boundaries. He feels oriented. Clear boundaries tell him where he stands and how to move forward. Instead of guessing or taking advantage of your availability, he becomes more intentional. He understands that access to you requires effort, presence, and consistency. Boundaries don't make him anxious. They make the connection more defined. For a man who prefers convenience over commitment, boundaries feel uncomfortable, not because they are unfair, but because they remove easy access. When you stop being endlessly available and stop tolerating mixed signals, he is forced to confront his own intentions. Some men step up because clarity challenges them to grow. Others step away because they were never prepared to meet standards. That reaction is not your fault. It is the purpose of boundaries working correctly. Matching distance as a boundary also strengthens your self-trust. You stop second-guessing your feelings and start honoring them. Instead of questioning whether you are asking for too much, you recognize when you are receiving too little. Boundaries give you permission to respond to reality rather than hope. They anchor you in truth instead of potential. Boundaries shift communication from emotional to intentional. You no longer feel the need to explain, or justify your needs. Your actions speak. Your consistency teaches others how to treat you. When you respect your own limits, you attract respect without demanding it. Most importantly, boundaries invite clarity. They remove emotional fog and replace it with visible choices. A man either aligns with your boundaries or he doesn't. There is no guessing, chasing, or waiting. You see clearly whether the connection has substance or is built on convenience. In that clarity, you gain peace. You stop trying to manage outcomes and start trusting yourself. Boundaries don't guarantee someone will stay, but they guarantee that whoever does stay is there by choice, effort, and respect, not access without responsibility.